this episode, Alex Wit sits down for a third appearance. If you haven't yet, then also check out episode 2, where Wit talks about the origins of his thirst for travel and hiking on the PCT. Also, check out episode 6, where he discusses island hopping in the Caribbean. Indulge yourself, enjoy your favorite beverage, and enjoy part 3 with Alex Wit and his South American adventure. Cheers. Welcome back to Whatchu Drinkin.
Thanks for having me. How you been, Alan?
I'm doing great. Told you earlier. Pretty stoked from this weekend vibe. Just went to see 311 Tallahassee. Sick.
Yeah, I'm excited for my Enzo concert on Friday. Get down to Red Rocks.
Yeah, Red Rocks is a fun place to see a show too, man. I'm stoked for you.
Actually, the last band I saw there was 311.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I never got to see them there. Ski season, man. You guys are wrapping up soon.
12 days left in the season. Not that I'm counting or anything. Yeah, it's coming to an end.
Wow.
So everybody's trying to get their days on the mountain. I've gone the last 5 days straight trying to get my last ones in. I'm up to like 46 days this season. So right around, my goal is about 50. You know, as long as I get over 50, I'm happy. So
I'm nice and easy with the night riding too.
Me and my roommate Jake always go every like Friday, Saturday. He'll get off work, I'll get off work. We'll just go take a couple laps, you know, watch sunset, whatever.
Yeah,
you know.
That's sick. I know. Yeah. I appreciate you for taking the time to do this. I know which means, you know, all the work and other responsibilities. That, there's not a lot of time to have fun up there, as I know from when I lived with you.
Hey, what are you talking about?
I don't care.
True.
Listen, bro, this grill alone cost me like 3 months of work and a lot of pain. I got shot in my leg.
What about your leg?
I got shot in the leg.
Where?
Right in the back of it. Motherfucker, I was trying to run away like a and the motherfucker shot me.
It can seem that way sometimes, but when you look back, you realize how much fun you're really having.
Yeah, it was a good time, man. I do miss it.
We're always hiring. I'm hiring bartenders, bro.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm pretty stationed in Florida at the moment.
Fair enough. Worst places to be.
Right. So speaking of palm trees and warm weather, what are we talking about this time?
So this is summer of 2018. Last year was me jumping through the Caribbean and, you know, doing a little bit of the PCT again. This was my first real big jump out of the country. And it was really interesting because I literally like spent probably weeks trying to find this flight. And I ended up in South America, in Brazil, because I just found a really cheap flight from Miami. So I booked the flight, and it's really funny because then after I booked the flight, I found it out I needed a visa to go to Brazil. So
Not the passport?
Nope, I had to apply for a visa to go as a tourist. I mean, it was like $100, $200. It wasn't anything major.
Easy process.
Not really. I had to resubmit like 3 times because I would get you have to have your passport photo, so I kept scanning it to put it on there. And finally the unlock for that was I had whatever photo place digitally send me the photos, and I uploaded, and it was no problem. But like, I was like 2 or 3 weeks out from my flight when I got approved for my visa, and it was just like, okay, this is actually becoming kind of a problem. But my flight was only like $250 from Miami to Manaus, Brazil.
Wow.
So that's why I ended up in Brazil, because I had always wanted to go to South America, and I found a $250 flight there, and so I just had to make it from Colorado to Nashville to go see my parents, and I went on a windsurfing trip to the Outer Banks with my dad. He goes like every year, and so it just lined up, and I got to jump in with him.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it was great. You know, I windsurfed when I was younger, and so my dad got to teach me and do all this, and then we got to talk a lot about our trip to South America because he was going to meet me in South America that summer. So, you know, went and saw the parents like I usually do at the beginning or end of these trips. And after my Outer Banks trip back in Nashville, and you were supposed to pick me up in Nashville, but your mom came down, dogs came down, couldn't fit me in the car. So do you remember what happened there, Alan? You stepped on it.
The rack on top or something, bro? Come on.
So I had to take a 24-hour Greyhound bus, you know, because it's left in like the middle of the night, you know, and went to Mobile, Alabama. And, you know, dude, it was your classic, like exactly what you think of your worst stories on there. Like there was almost a fight. When I first went to leave, there was no driver. The driver just didn't show up. So they had to like get this guy who had just driven there to turn around and drive back. And, you know, all of this like little stuff of like people arguing and fighting on the bus. I think the cops had to get called at one point. It was just one of those like classic, like, yeah, this seems like it would be in a movie.
It's great. Be like, I got a CDL, I'll drive.
I don't have a CDL.
How you doing this time?
I've driven buses, you know, I could have. They're not that hard. So went through Mobile, and I think it took me straight to Pensacola.
That rings a bell. Yeah, I remember thinking about.
You know, you came and picked me up. I was super tired, all that. I mean, you just kind of bummed around, you know, Florida. We went down to Floribama. You remember that hotel room? You in the ocean. I thought so. For everybody to understand, me and Alan were drinking not mudslides. What is it down there that they drink? Bushwhackers. And we're out in the beach, and Alan screams something and runs off. And I'm like, where the hell is he? So I start like looking for him. I'm calling him. He's not answering. 2 hours go by. And at this point, I'm like, all right, I don't know what to do. I end up calling his mom. Steve comes down and we're like looking for him. And like, what did you do? Like, I don't remember exactly what you did.
Okay. Was this the night that you were doing Jaeger bombs with Jared?
Yes.
Okay, so that night, I don't know what happened. I ended up realizing that I had jumped in the ocean during red flag night.
Hurricane coming in.
Hurricane coming in. I ended up losing my shirt, losing my shoes, and my passport, and I didn't know that I'd lost all them until I tried to come back in to find you so we can get our Uber ride home. And the security guard looks at me and he says, "You can't come in." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You have no shirt." He looks down, "You have no shoes." Oh, I didn't know how to do it at that point. So I don't. The only thing the only thing I remember was I woke up in a bed, super comfortable. I always like sleeping with the TV on, so the TV's on.
As me and your mom are hanging out in the Waffle House parking lot, like getting ready to call Coast Guard to look for you.
And I was finally look up in that bed. I'm like, I'm just gonna go back to sleep for a minute. This is really comfortable. And then it hit me. I was like, oh shit, I lost Wit. So I jumped up, had to use the maintenance guy's phone to get a hold of you guys. And you guys probably didn't laugh as much as I did about it, but
That was an interesting trip. So, let's see. From there, after the hurt,
it was like 3 weeks. The hurricane wasn't shit, but
no, we like a chair blew over or something.
A paper flag ripped. But no, I think we chilled for 3 weeks. We did a little work on that boat.
Built a deck.
We did build the deck up, man.
Yeah.
We might have played with the water hose and kayaks and acted like we were in water.
It was hot, man. I don't know how you live down there.
We weren't having such good luck at the beach, so we did our best.
Yeah, we rented a car, drove down to, what was it, Marco Island with the boat?
Yeah, Marco Island. We ended up staying on the boat that I eventually lived on 3 nights. Marco Island's beautiful. We were back in the mangroves. We decided to go fishing. How did we
Yeah.
do that?
I was fishing with my trekking pole, and I just had fishing line strapped around my trekking pole, and I'm sitting there just fishing with it, and I catch a catfish, it was like a decent size, except I lost grip of it, and it stabbed me in the leg, and I'm like, I have blood running down my leg, and I'm like, great, I'm going to another country in like 5 days, and now I get just been stabbed in the leg by something with like, God knows what bacteria on it, So I think I have a picture of me holding the catfish with my leg bleeding somewhere. We filleted it up, cooked it, had a good time. Then we drove over to Miami, went through Alligator Alley.
Yeah. So our first alligator live off the side.
Yeah, saw a bunch of that. I ended up taking Tori down that same exact road when we drove past you. Yeah.
Let's go.
We partied in Miami for a night and kicked me out at the airport. Yeah, kicked me out of the airport, whatever time in the morning. You drove back, returned the rental car. So here's where it starts getting a little interesting on this travel because, so I take off and I got a layover in Venezuela. Now, right around there was like, right when that civil war was kind of like starting to break out and whatnot. So I'm like a little nervous about going through Venezuela. But, I'm like, all right, whatever. It's a layover. So we land. Yeah. And so we land. And then after deboard the plane, we're doing something. And at this point, my Spanish is really bad. But I figured out that the plane broke. And I'm in this airport. There's no running water. Nothing is open. And I have no idea how long I'm going to be stuck there. They're making announcements all the time. But I don't know what they're saying. So I'm like, I got my guidebook with me, and I'm like looking it through it. And I find the Spanish, and I go up to somebody, I try to say it, and he's like, huh? So I like pointed at it, and he read it, and, he's like, oh, I don't know. So I'm like, great. So, at this point, like, I'm talking to my mom, who's super stoked about me being stuck here with no information. She's super happy about it, just ecstatic. And eventually, I kind of go up to the same guy again that I talked to, and he goes, 20 minutos. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like, we're leaving in 20 minutes. Like, this is great. They got it fixed, which put us a couple hours behind. I think we were stuck there for 4 or 5 hours, so long enough to be like...
How long is your flight?
It really was only like 3 or 4 hours to Venezuela, then like another 2 or 3 hours.
That's not bad.
So it wasn't super long. I was bummed because I was supposed to land like mid-afternoon. I was going to be like, hey, I get to see the Amazon rainforest from there. Well, I saw a little bit of it. It's a really big forest. It's just green. When you're 20,000 feet up, 30,000 feet up, it's hard to see that. So, we get back on the plane. We start making our way south. I land in Manaus, Brazil, which is in northern Brazil in Amazonia, in the Amazon, right along the Amazon River in Rio Negro. And I remember like this distinctly, like getting in the cab or Uber, whatever I got to go to my hostel. And, he's driving along and he's going through green lights. It's like, okay. And he's flashing his brights. I'm like, what's he doing? Like, I don't understand this. And, I don't speak Portuguese and only like 10% of Brazil speaks English.
Right.
So I'm just like riding along and then he blows through a red light flashing his brights. And I was like, oh, he's letting everybody know that they're coming through because they just don't stop at red lights. Like, and it was also, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So it wasn't like peak traffic times or nothing. So I get to my hostel, crash out after a long day, start hanging out with people the next day, just hiking around, walking around Manaus, like exploring. Whereas, get out and start reading my guidebook and meeting people. And I met this guy named Liam. And this is like my second night, so I'd probably gone down to the beach and, you know, down to the docks and stuff, eating food. And I meet this guy Liam from Canada, and he had flown down there to meet some girl he had met online. And, you know, so we're sitting there talking all day, just drinking, hanging out. And, you know, we get on to the, like, organs kind of being harvested, like all the things that can go wrong with his kind of scenario. And he's like, well, I'm going to meet this girl's friends tonight. Do you want to come with me? I'm like, okay, like, screw it. Yeah, let's go over to this bar or whatever. And it's super awesome because, like, the bar is tiny, but the entire, like, you know, sidewalk is massive and just chairs everywhere. So, like, you don't go into a bar there. And they do have some that you do, but, like, this specific one's, like, the whole square, which is lined with seats outside, and everybody just sits out there. Yeah. And it's really cool how they drink in Brazil because you never order your own beer in Brazil. You order like a 40 ounce or 22 ounce or whatever they call it down there. It's really a liter down there. Okay. And they put it in this, like, we all know what koozies are, but this is like a cooler koozie that's like an inch thick. And they put it in there and you have these really small glasses. And that way your beer stays cold. You drink small amounts and you kind of like keep pouring more and more and more. And so we're hanging out with this, you know, Brazilian who speaks English, getting to know him. And I'm with this guy, Liam, and this guy, and he's, oh, my friends are coming. And I'm like, okay, cool, you know, whatever. And like two of the most like burly, like muscular guys walk up and they're all like, they just come to hang out with us. And these are his friends. So I'm kind of like, oh, well, this is interesting. This is kind of a little bit different. And, you know, again, being my first, like, really, like, big jump when I'm really drinking. I went to Europe before this and stuff. You know, after that conversation with my friend, I'm kind of nervous. And I did, like, everything wrong. You know, they, like, rolled a joint. I'm like, I'm going to smoke their drugs with them. I left my drinks alone with them. Like, all those things you're not really supposed to do. And so I'm, like, getting a little paranoid. I can feel that weed paranoia kind of setting in. And so we're standing there, and all of a sudden there's this, like, explosion behind us. And a transformer blew up. So it's just sparks, not an actual explosion, you know, but, like, the whole block goes dark. And I'm just, like, in shock. I'm like, okay, it's my second day in this country. I don't know what's going on. You know, no one's running or anything. No one's, like, nothing's wrong. And I'm like, all right, well, you know, so do we got to go home now? The bar's closed. And he's like, no, you know, no. So some guy next to us just turns his car on, cranks up his stereo, and they just sell the beer for cash, you know, and they just, you know, you can see a couple cars that just turned it on. They're like, no, the party doesn't stop for the power. No. And so I'm just like, all right, cool. And so smoke another joint with them, hanging out, having a good time, still like really kind of paranoid about it. And it's like, all right, you know, now it's time for us to go home. And I remember they were like, oh, you can't walk home. I'm like, what do you mean? And so we're kind of starting to walk home, and he, like, this other guy who didn't speak very good English, but could kind of understand it, just opens the back door of his car and says, get in. And this is this big muscular guy. And I'm kind of like, you know, really nervous at this point. I'm drunk. I'm stoned out of my mind. I'm paranoid. And my buddy Liam, that I just met that night, well, you know, I just met this guy in a hostel. He took me out with like 3 of his Brazilian friends that he said he didn't know. And like these guys are like, go to the gym very regularly, very muscular. And I'm like, all right. So I took the chance and I got in. And I'm like riding with like my phone in my hand, watching where they're going to make sure they're taking me back to our hostel. And like, lo and behold, like they were just 3 super solid guys. They dropped us off at home, had a good night. I ended up hanging out with them like a couple days later with Liam and the girl he'd gone down there to, which by the record, he's now married to that girl.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. So it does work out sometimes.
It works out sometimes.
Wow.
She's super awesome. She was gorgeous. Super cool to hang out with. And so I can't remember where exactly he lives now, but, you know, they ended up like, you know, I think he lives in Brazil now, you know, cool. And they got married in Brazil and all that stuff. So it's a really, you know, again, you can be nervous about things and not everybody's out to get you.
True.
But if you ever get the chance to go to Manaus, it's such a interesting city. Because so if you're unfamiliar with like the Brazilian boom, what it was is pre 1940s, 50s, somewhere in there, they have the rubber tree. And they were the only place in the world that could produce rubber. And you get it, it's like sap from a tree, and you like melt it and all this stuff. Until they started making synthetic, and people took seeds and did it out in Asia and stuff. But they had this massive boom. And during that time where like there's this huge French and European kind of influence in some of their buildings, and there's this theater there that you look at the outside, it's like, okay, it's, you know, looks kind of similar to all the other buildings, but when you walk inside, it is still, and I've been through theaters in Europe and buildings in Asia and South America, through the United States, like one of the most gorgeous theaters I've ever seen. Just the intricate wood laid, you know, the intricate wood carvings and all of this stuff. And it was, the acoustics when there were like some of the best I've ever heard. Absolutely amazing theater right there in like the middle of Manaus.
Yeah, wood
Just
resonates really well. It would probably be better for that application. It's not
and
like
it's like
hardwood down there.
yeah, and they're pulling out the rainforest stuff that is now protected and you can't do. But this was 70 years ago, something like that, 80 years ago. So yeah, just absolutely gorgeous. So of course, me being the outdoorsman I am, I'm not going to the Amazon without going to the Amazon. So I take a tour out to some remote camp. Got to go to Meeting of the Waters, which is there, it's Rio Negro and the Amazon meeting. So you've got the black water and the brown water of the Amazon, and there's just this line where they meet. They don't mix because they're different densities and physics behind it. Yeah, I mean it's all fresh water there, but it has to do with the temperature and the density, and all that stuff, and eventually they mix.
Yeah.
And we go out.
Down here we can see a line where our rivers hit the bed. And you can see a distinct line. Well, not all the time, but as long as the waters are calm, there's definitely, like, you can see where two different waters meet. It's cool.
And it's that exact same thing. It's whatever the physics that somebody else could probably tell you a lot better than I could.
We're not scientists.
And so, I'm on the way out there. I get to see all this, and the Amazon is such an amazing place because you have this like massive river, right? That's what everybody thinks about, the Amazon. But what you don't realize is in the high season, that water drops like 20 feet during the dry season. So during the wet season, which was when I was there, you'll be going and the boat will just take a left and you're like, why are we going into the trees? And they'll kind of just push through it and it will just open up into a whole nother like lake or another canal. And like, it's literally like, think of New York City streets, but overgrown with like trees where they're just all these intercrossing things and they just know their way through it. I could understand how you could so easily get lost in there because it's insane, like maze. And so, we're weaving in and out of it and kind of getting to this camp, and they put us up in a hut, we got the bug net over the bed, like everybody's probably seen in movies and whatnot.
And, some snakes. Like,
there's definitely snakes and stuff out there. Brazilian wandering spiders, which is an extremely poisonous spider that just wanders around the floor. Of the monkeys, piranhas, jaguars, caiman, which are like small alligators who don't know what those are. And they're all over the place. I mean, you got piranhas, you got all that stuff. I mean, we had like walls around us and a roof and stuff, There was one night they were like, hey, make sure you lock your door tonight. Like, we think we saw something. And they wouldn't tell us what. Whether that was just them messing with the tourists or what, but we slept with the door locked.
No.
Yeah. So we got to go like piranha fishing and like catch piranhas, take them back and like, fillet them, cooked them. And then of course, yeah, I mean, they're actually pretty good. Nothing, yeah, I mean, they're fish. Nothing like crazy. And nothing that really stuck out to me, Then, of course, I went swimming in the Amazon because I wasn't going to go to the Amazon River and not go swimming. And I did it on the same day that I went piranha fishing. So let's see. What did I do next? That was probably... Oh, I went camping. So, of course, got to go camping in the Amazon. So they, take us on a boat. We go out to their camp spot where they kind of have this like a shelter set up. And we get all set up. We're in hammocks with bug nets and stuff. And we cook dinner out there. We had chicken or whatever. And he takes this half a chicken and he goes back down the trail towards the boat. And he goes, everybody come here, come here, come here. And he starts slapping the water like this, just kind of tapping it. And all of a sudden you see 2 eyes pop up and start swimming towards it. And it was just this like 5-6 foot caiman, right? And so he starts feeding it chicken. And he takes it down more chicken and throws it on a string and throws it over and gets it to come up out of the water and all this stuff. And eventually gives him like half a chicken, right? And he looks at us, he goes, don't worry, we will be safe tonight. He will guard us. So I brought a bunch of beer, and me and this girl from Washington, whose name I can't remember, like stay up late drinking beer. And every, 30, 45 minutes, I'd look down, we could see the trail. And we would look down there, and this caiman would just be sitting at the water, staring. And he would just chill there the entire night. It was absolutely crazy just having this thing like 20, 30 yards from where I'm sleeping.
That's cool.
Just hanging out. And the guide also was nice enough to let us know, you're going to hear noises tonight. And you're going to hear howling. Because there's these things called howler monkeys. And they scream all night long. And it's them communicating, but it's just crazy when you're laying there like hearing it. So it was a interesting night.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if I would like to be camping in the Amazon. I felt weird just being at my campsite I used to own, like camping several days in a row. I'd hear all kinds of stuff. I know for sure one time I saw like a young black bear, and when you're out there by yourself, because I had nobody else with me, that was kind of sketchy. Like, it was weird. The Amazon's another level.
It definitely is. Like the wildlife there is just so intricate, so much of it. Really cool to see, like the birds, the monkeys. You're riding in the boat, and you see monkeys swinging from the trees.
That's cool.
And they're just normal. So we got to go out another night and like catch little caiman and stuff. And I got to hold a, 2-foot caiman, 3-foot caiman, whatever it was. And another really funny story was we were hiking. We were through the Amazon, and the guide kind of goes up to this coconut and cuts it open, pulls out this like white bug looking larva thing, gives this like 5-minute speech in Portuguese, which I speak zero of at this point, and just turns to me in English and goes, eat it. And I went, and he put it in my hand, and I went, and I like threw it in my mouth, and he has this like shocked look on his face. And I'm like, is it safe? And he's like, yeah. And so I like bit down on it, and it like, imagine a coconut gusher. And I would eat it again. It was actually really good. But he was just,
right.
Yeah, and this is one of the survival techniques is kind of what he told me after, is like, showing how to get water in the Amazon, clean water, and how people survive out there. And he was just shocked that he just goes, eat it. And I said, okay. And just like threw this bug in my mouth, still wiggling, like alive. Oh man, it was an interesting like experience on that one. And that's where I met Mariana, who was a Brazilian from Rio de Janeiro that I kind of like hung out with. She didn't speak English. But we kind of hung out a little bit afterwards, and we take the boat back, do tours on the way back, stop, see waterfalls, and hear the same thing about the walking trees. Because in Brazil, they actually have trees that walk.
I think I may have heard something about this. It's kind of weird.
And they may only move like ½ inch to an inch a year or 2
Right.
inches, but they move towards water. And it's just like they're up on their root system like this, and it just kind of slowly like moves like that.
Crazy.
Absolutely like nuts. The Amazon. Definitely recommend going down there. Take a tour. You know, get out there and explore it. So I was out there for, I think it was like 5 days, you know, doing just different stuff, sunsets, like, you know, exploring, going and seeing farms and stuff out there. And you get to see some of the, like, how the locals live. And some of their places have like one light bulb and they turn it on for, you know, 4 hours a night and that's it. You know, that's all they, no, they got power, but they only turn power on to it every like for 4 hours at night or something, or they can only afford that.
Right.
So they just live out there with it. And, you know, I mean, people have been doing it for thousands of years.
Yeah. It's natural.
Yeah, it's such an amazing culture, like, shock to me, but such an amazing culture experience to, like, see how those people do it and, like, how they do really live off the land and make all these really cool, like, dishes out of food and stuff. Because in the north, it's a lot of fish. In the south, you get a lot more meat of, like, cow and stuff. So anyway, I make my way back to Manaus after that tour, and you know, I was friends with Mariana, and I was in a really good hostel that time. Like that was one of the best hostels, not because of the hostel, just because of the people that I met. And so I was hanging out with Mariana, and then I met Astrid, who was a French girl, and Bronte, who was an Australian, and you know, Liam was still there, so I hung out with him. And Bert is another guy I met. We're all kind of hanging out, and Bert goes, "Oh, my friend called me. And he was a local Brazilian too. Who spoke English, and his mom was actually with him. And his friend had called him, and they were getting ready for festival. So one of their biggest festivals was like a few months away, and they were doing this practice, and so they're having a party for the practice because Brazilians like to party, and they're going to party for the party. And so he takes us to this like swimming pool. It's like a high school swimming pool with just people packed around it, shoulder to shoulder. It's hot, it's humid, it's, you know, like, but there's cold beer and there's basically like a marching band. And so the idea is that they have this bull that the bull moves and does all this, and they have it dancing to music, and it's part of their like huge culture of these like bull and something else kind of like fighting, and they tell a story. And so we got to watch them like practice and do all this stuff, and I got to meet the guy who had the honor of being the head of the bull, and you know, and that was just a huge honor for him, so I got to hear all about that. And I really missed like festival because I wish I'd been able to go. They fill like a massive soccer stadium. You know, you're talking like 30, 40,000 people come to this, and they sell out, and there's people outside, you know, because it's such a big event. And I, you know, got to taste my little piece of it, you know, not see the whole thing, but I got a little taste of it.
Oh, that's cool though. I also like how it seems like they basically were practicing theater.
Kind of.
Right? Like, what's really funny, what popped in my head was like, so this guy's like, I get to be the bull. It's like the guy who used to act like Jesus, and Jesus is superstar.
So after a long night of drinking, lots of those, I think it was a couple days later after just kind of hanging out and like taking it in, drinking a lot of cachaça. They do caipirinhas. So it's very similar to like a mojito, but with cachaça and a lot of sugar and limes.
What's
and
cachaça?
Liquor. It's a Brazilian liquor, and I don't remember exactly what it is. I'll go into it a little bit later with cachaça de jambule, but it's like a root that grows in Brazil that they ferment and make liquor out of.
Oh, that's cool.
So at this point, it's time for me to move on. And again, you know, I'm talking with Astrid and Mariana and Bronte, and we're all like, hey, we're all going to the same place. Let's go together. And like I said, the river's like the New York streets. The Amazon is the highway.
Right.
No one takes buses. You know, you get on a boat. So I was going to Belém, and it's a 5-day boat ride down the Amazon. And so we're talking to the hostel, you know, people that were super helpful. And they go, well, everybody, most like travelers, they stop in Alter do Chão. It's about 3 days on the boat, and then you get off and you hang out, and then you get on the next boat and go. So we get on this boat. You're sleeping in hammocks in an open deck, and you're talking like hammocks. There's one here, and then there's another person here, and then like that.
Right.
And it was like a party on the boat. Some guy who spoke English, and like I can't believe how many people I found that spoke English, considering 10% of them speak English. He goes, "Oh, my son, he brought his DJ equipment." And so he sets up and is just going to town, and one of the locals, like this other girl, like tried to teach my white ass to dance their dance down there. We ended up making out and hammered drunk. Like I fell asleep underneath my hammock. I didn't even make it into my hammock. And just fell asleep on the metal deck of the boat, passed out drunk. And so we get to Alter de Chaux, take a cab over, and this is possibly one of my favorite beaches in the world. Like everywhere I've been, from Asia to Europe to around the United States through South America, the Caribbean, all of it. And it's got that like white sand beach like the Caribbean, clear water, and you're in the little town, and you take a boat over to Love Island, Amore Isla, and it's just this little island that you can like throw a football across the beach of this section, and they've got bars out there and food and restaurants and all this stuff. So we head out there, and it's got a little knoll up there, probably 200-300 vertical feet, nothing major. And we hike up there, and this is also one of the most epic sunsets I've ever seen. So we're seeing over the treetops. The sun is set, and it's got all the beautiful colors and all this stuff. And we're up there with me, Mariana, and Astrid, and Bronte. And all of a sudden, we start hearing like the beat of drums, and we're like, kind of like, what's going on? Like we don't, we had just gotten there, and so we can hear these drums kind of getting louder. So we start hiking our way down because it's dark at this point. Catch our boat back, and it's like literally you're paying this guy like I think it's $1.25 in US to row you back across. And we're splitting this 4 ways. So
What?
we're like, yeah, I mean there was 4 of us. We're like, yeah, and exchange rates are great. US dollar is amazing. And Mariana is talking to the guy because she speaks Portuguese, and Bronte speaks fluent Spanish, so she can catch enough to translate to me.
Right.
And they're like, "Oh, there's a festival tonight." And the guy points us, and I'm at this point, I'm just kind of following along. And so we go over, and there's a bunch of people dancing. There's music, and it's all like straight locals. Like I am the white guy there. And so we're hanging out. And this guy comes up and he shows me this bottle, and he's like trying to ask me if I want it. And I'm like, my broken Spanish is like, "What is it?" And he explains it very quickly in Portuguese. So I'm just go. My favorite saying throughout South America was "Por qué no?" which is why not? And he just goes, "You want?" And that guy kind of understood the mannerisms. It's like "Por qué no?" And so he shows me, and it's cachaça de jambu. And it's a special root in northern Brazil. And he shows me how you do this shot. So he pours a shot, and he goes, you take a half sip, you swish it around your mouth, you swallow it, and then you drink the rest. It's like, okay, like I don't understand this, but I'm going to do it. And so I take this half shot, I swish it around my mouth, and I take the rest of the shot. And I'm like, all right. And then my mouth starts to tingle. And that's like what this cachaça de jambu does. It's got this weird root that makes your mouth just kind of tingle, almost like you were touching your tongue to a 9-volt, but like not that shock. It's just like, imagine a very like calming, like weird thing. Not very good flavor. Definitely an interesting flavor, but I took a couple shots with the guy and danced with a bunch of people, and made our way back to this like tiny little hostel with like, moss growing on the walls and stuff. And that's where I met, Alejandro. And hanging out with like locals, I will tell you, if you travel and you go somewhere and you don't speak the language and you don't hang out with locals, you'll get a different experience. Not a bad one. But when I was hanging out with the locals, Mariana had already set us up the next day with a tour guide who was going to take us to like this big grand tour. And it ended up being like $7 a person, because at that point it was $1 was worth 5 of theirs. So whenever I say, $7, that was like $35 to them per person. Yeah. And we went to like mud baths. We went on hikes, and he just took us all around into the sacred mud baths where it's the cleansing, and there's just covered in mud. Definitely a whole different world when you travel with locals and or speak the language.
Yeah.
Definitely a different experience.
Yeah, I can see that. You know what? $35 and you got a full tour and a day at the spa.
Pretty much. I mean, and I could see Mariana, she like talked him down. She negotiated with him. She did great and got all 4 or 5. No, it was like 6 of us though. So you think about it, it was 6 of us on one boat. It adds up for him. Yeah. So, we make our way back to the boat. I think we were there for like 3 or 4 days to continue our trip down to Belen, which is like known for their food and things like this. What I did not tell my mother at that point, this is also was the most dangerous city in Brazil. But
on what standard? Like,
it had something to do with crime, and all of that type of stuff, violence and whatnot. So made our way down there. Again with Bronte and Astrid and Mariana, and there was a couple of people that kind of tagged along with us. When you're all going the same way, you all get together, you know each other, you can watch each other's stuff, all that stuff.
mm-hmm.
So throughout this entire boat ride, the interesting thing is that I didn't understand why people kept bringing groceries on. And what you'll see is canoes come out from the Amazon, and the kids go like this, and they're asking you for food. And so you'll see people throw food and groceries to them, So, the next port we got into, I went and bought like a couple bags of cookies and like threw some out to them.
That's cool.
And then there'll be motorboats that will pull up and tie off to your boat. And they'll sell shrimp and acai and all this stuff. So it was like dried, small, dried salted shrimp. And we all decided, like, what are you doing for dinner? And they're like, well, I guess we're going to eat shrimp and acai. And so we sat on the top deck of this 3-deck boat with like 2 or 3 kilos of shrimp. And I remember Bronte coming back, and she goes, he only wanted 2 reals for it. So it's like 40 cents is what he wanted per kilo. And so we got 2 kilos. So it was like 4 reals. He goes, here's a 10, and gave him like 10 reals. And he's like trying to give her change. He's like, no, it's fine. Again, she's got the Australian dollar. And we're like, so for $2, we're getting 4 pounds of dried shrimp and raw acai, which is surprisingly not as good as I thought. It's very bitter.
I think the ones that they serve here, like the acai bowls, like I think they sugar them up really bad. You know what I mean? Like
They do.
a lot of fruit on that way. Like what we know it in America is way different than the raw fruit from like the country.
Yeah, and so I agree. It was all right. I ate it. Didn't have anything else to eat, so yeah. So that was really cool, just kind of seeing it. And you can see little huts as you're going past, and farms and towns, and you'd pull in and dock, and people get off and on the boat. And sometimes you'd be there for 2 or 3 hours because they're unloading cargo or loading cars or motorbikes or whatever. It's just interesting to see how they utilize that river.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we get down to Belen. It's much more of like a city than like Manaus and things. So it's kind of more of like I wouldn't quite call it New York, but that type of city. And we had met two other girls whose names I don't remember either on the boat. And we were all staying in the same hostel. We all decided, yeah, we're going to stay here. You know, we're friends, all that stuff. I've been traveling with Mariana, Astrid, and all that, Bronte for like 2 weeks now. We've been hanging out 3 weeks. And there's this concert of some very famous Brazilian artist who I obviously had no idea who it was. And they're all like convincing me to go. I'm like, sure, why not? So we go to this nightclub, which was not in the nicest part of town. I found out before we went. And so I'm walking down the street with these like 5 girls and obviously walking past some ladies of the night who then in Portuguese look at them and go, call me their pimp. And I'm just walking like, what did she say? And she goes, oh, she said you are a pimp. And I was just like, all right, you know, these girls were like stoked to have some guy go with them. They're like, whatever. So we went and we danced our heart out. The artist was amazing. I found out later she's like super famous in Brazil. I had such a great time. You know, came back and Astrid was going east. Mariana had to go back to work. Bronte was going somewhere else. And they all kind of split in that like same time frame. And, you know, that really was like a really emotional time for me. Because I really got a connection with these people. I spent 2 or 3 weeks with them. I just met them. We would spend like day in and day out together.
You felt comfortable probably because you had them.
They could translate for me. So I will say Google Translate goes a long way.
Yes, it does.
And that helped me out a lot with Mariana and getting around and whatnot. So after that, you know, I kind of hung out in Berlin for a couple days and found a cheap flight to Brasilia, which is their capital, or Washington, D.C., their, you know, country capital or whatever. Which I got weird looks when people are like, you're going to Brasilia. Like, it's not really a big, like, tourist destination. But I was like, hey, I found a cheap flight. Like, that's where I'm going. It gets me closer to Rio, which was my next stop. And for those who don't understand how big Brazil is, Brazil is the size of the continental United States. Because I had originally planned to spend a month there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I was just winging it.
Right.
And then I found out how big it was. So I spent 2 total months there. And so at this point, you know, I'm about a month in or so. And I go to Brasilia, and there happens to be another girl at my hostel who speaks English and was like really excited to talk to me because she had learned English in Brazil and only had ever spoken English with her teachers.
Right. That's cool.
So I was the first like native English speaker that she'd really spoken to.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was just like, oh, we're going to go do this and we're going to go do that. And like, I took a tour of their like state capital. We've all kind of like gone on one of those in grade school and stuff. And she's sitting there like translating for me. Eventually I just looked at her and said, you don't have to do that. I'm here to see the architecture, whatever. You know, we had dinner, hung out. And that was where I went to my first Brazilian steakhouse. And if you don't know what those are, it's a meat buffet. And they just come to your table with whatever meat they have on their stick or on their spit and just keep shaving it off until you flip this card from green to red. Oh my God, this was so good. And if you go to one of these Brazilian steakhouses in the US, it's going to be like $40, $50, $60, $70, $80.
And not even as good, probably.
No. $9. But you times that by 5, that's $45 for them.
Well,
you know,
have food like value menu deals for that cheap anymore. Brazilian, legit Brazilian.
All you could eat.
What?
All you could eat. It was amazing. So then I make my jump down to Rio de Janeiro, where Mariana lives. And for those who aren't familiar with Rio, it's very hilly, beautiful beaches. Copacabana Beach is the iconic beach there. And then you have favelas. Favelas are basically their word for ghetto, for their, you know, not so, you know, savory areas. And there's definitely spots, you know, where they go, you're white. Don't go there. So what do? I stay in a favela. It was a pacified favela, but you would walk around, and it's really interesting because they have like 5 different types of cops there. They have the military, they have the police, they have a civilian band, they have like a couple other ones, and they've worked really hard to get to where they are. Yeah. I had 0 problems, like never worried. And even one night I got hammered trash, like vaguely remember things, but I'm just walking around this favela and there's cops with machine guns, and I just see some locals dancing, and they kind of say something to me in Portuguese, and I just walk over and start dancing with them and get a beer. And the Brazilians are some of the nicest people I have ever met. Right. They are so accommodating and so nice and just welcoming, and they just like sit down at their table and they're just kind of talking, and one of them spoke broken English, and so I kind of communicated a little bit. And, you know, I ended up taking a Portuguese class for 2 weeks there, trying to be able to talk to Mariana, and, you know, which was really great because I ended up like, I could hold a conversation now. I probably couldn't do it now, but I could hold a conversation if I just met you for about 20, 30 minutes. And like, where you live, what do you do, where are you from, where have you been, where are you going? Yeah. And it was a lot of fun. You know, like you get to go to Pau de Sugar, which is the Sugar Mountain. And they have a gondola that takes you up there. And I got to watch the sunset across Rio, and Christ the Redeemer, which is one of the wonders of the world. You know, the Christ standing up on the mountain with the statue, which was built for the slaves being released in whatever year. And so the things didn't quite work out with Mariana, which was fine, you know. Here's the really funny thing about my Portuguese class. So I'm talking to my Portuguese teacher, and I'm telling him, all right, yeah, I got a Tinder account going. And he goes, let me see it. And so I showed it to him, and he starts editing it and say, no, don't say that, say this, and all of this. And he's like, you'll be good now. 13 matches in one night. Oh. So I will say a couple things about like specifically Rio de Janeiro. They really love their gringos down there. It's a very sexual kind of culture, and some of the most beautiful men and women I have ever seen in my life. It's such an amazing city.
Of course it's sexual. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not the only thing that's called Brazilians, you know what I'm saying?
And it holds very true. And a lot of that time I was just hanging out on the beach, and they have, you know, same as anywhere else, they got bars along the beach. And I literally sat there all day one day at one bar. Like this guy just kind of was just like another beer. Like I drank probably like a good 5-6 liters of beer. But you're sweating. I'm just kind of sipping. I'm getting drunk. And watching these guys play this sport. It's kind of like volleyball, but you can only use your feet and your head.
Like soccer?
Very similar, but it has to go up and over the net. And so, like, imagine that on a volleyball court. Yeah. It was invented in Rio, and I had never seen it. And so I just sat there, like, and I think they were having a tournament, you know, teams were swapping out. I was just, like, watching this tournament right from there. So absolutely amazing. And just the waves at Copacabana, like, you know what a red flag day is. Yeah. They will go and like drag you out of the way, because you'll see where the water comes out and the beach kind of caves in, and you're talking like 10-foot curling waves, massive. Like some of the biggest waves that I have like seen consistently. Now I've seen those big waves on like those beaches and videos and stuff, but this was like every day.
A lot of surfing?
Some spots, yeah. But I think that it was like, maybe it was just the wrong time of year, but it would make some really good surfing, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's cool.
So in my class, I got to meet this French girl called Naïs, her name. We got pretty close, and I met a bunch of people throughout this entire trip. And those connections are so important. I ended up meeting Anais the next summer in Paris, and got to go have dinner with her, hang out with her, and show me around and stuff.
Sick.
And we ended up traveling to another spot and meeting up in Brazil. But then I also went to this museum called Museum of the Future, Museo de Futura, and it was one of the coolest museums I've ever been to. It's about sustainability. This like building moves and is all solar powered, and you sit there and you answer these questions and you see what your carbon footprint is.
Cool.
And it was just really cool. I got to see the Olympic Stadium from years before. So again, my time at Rio's kind of come to an end, and so I go to Foz do Iguaçu, which is just a really big waterfall. Think Niagara Falls, but bigger and more rainforest. And so I fly up there. I meet Nais there, and we take a couple tours together. We went to Argentina for a day and crossed the border, saw it from that side, and did a jet boat tour under the falls where we were just like getting drenched. Oh no, like we went under the waterfall. It wasn't even spray. It was just water.
Like a theme park ride.
And again, that was just building that amazing like connection. Where I met Nais in Paris the next year. I stayed at Astrid's house, the next year in Lyon, France. And there's some other people I meet this summer that everywhere I go the summer after this, I stayed with somebody or met somebody that I met on this trip.
That's cool.
And again, that local connection, I experienced things that never would have happened.
And you were around the travelers too, so like you met people who are avid world travelers, so it's nice because then they're always like, yeah, you're coming here, let's go, I got a place for you, let's go out to dinner, let's do this, like
just those things,
some bit of familiar, in your life when you're in a completely different country.
It's that's really cool. Nice to have that.
I can imagine. I haven't left the country yet. I went to the Virgin Islands. We talked about that last time. Yeah, I haven't even left the country, so I can only imagine, dude, just like taking off the backpack. And
it's a big world out there, and you don't need as much as you think. Cancel your Netflix account, save some money, go somewhere where the exchange rate's in your favor, and stay for a month or two.
And take your malaria medicine.
Oh. So I'll touch on that. I was taking malaria medicine up until the point I got to Rio de Janeiro. Yeah. And for anybody who's listening, knows the side effects for malaria medicine. For anybody who's never taken malaria medicine, when I got prescribed it, and I had already heard about this, he goes, have you ever taken malaria medicine? I said, no, I haven't. He goes, do you know what the side effects are? I said, I've heard some stories. He goes, they're true. And the official side effect is vivid dreams. Mm-hmm. The unwritten side effect is those are vivid nightmares.
Right.
And they truly are. And I had so much trouble sleeping. I was in Rio de Janeiro, and after a very horrible nightmare of me waking up sweating, I said I was done. Give me malaria over this. And I've been taking it again. I had to start 4 weeks or 3 weeks or something before I left. So that's when they started.
Yeah, we talked about it, but yeah, by the time you came to Florida and you were getting ready to leave for the trip, you were already suffering from it.
So I've been suffering for like 2 or 3 months at this point.
Yeah.
And I had trouble sleeping. I would only sleep well through the night if I was drunk. And after one significantly bad nightmare that I still remember very vividly to this day, I said, I'm done. Wow. And they've changed it a little bit now. Tori and I had to take some when we were in Asia, and it didn't happen. So thank God for medical science. Yeah. So after Foz do Iguaçu, fly back to Rio. I had met back up with my Tinder date. I think I was there for 2 more days. and it was time for me to leave because, like I said earlier, I was meeting my dad. We were meeting in Peru.
Right.
And so, funny story, I had bought my flight to Peru on this one credit card, right? And I hadn't used this credit card the entire time. But I bought a flight from Peru to, or for Brazil to Peru, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was out having dinner, and my debit card or whatever credit card wouldn't work, so I used that one again. And it was linked to my parents. So my mom calls me and goes, I just got a call about my card being stolen and used in Brazil. Was that you? And I was like, yeah, that was me. Like my other card wouldn't work. And I was like, this is odd that I could buy a flight from Brazil to Peru and they don't question it. But God forbid I buy a $12 dinner in Brazil where I just bought that flight from, and then they question it. Okay.
No,
I don't know.
that's like kind of makes sense. It's like to buy a flight, you had to like use your real name and all that stuff, you know.
So it was just one of those weird things where it's just like, okay.
Hold that fun.
And the other thing about flying in Brazil, so they basically have a social security number as their tax number. If you don't have that, you pay more.
That's too, right?
Yeah, but this they put in like all the time to buy a flight. It's basically to show that you're a U.S. or a Brazilian citizen, and if you don't have that number, the flight's probably 50 to 75% more expensive.
Yeah, it's to prevent money laundering, I bet.
No, it's to tax the tourists.
Oh.
I mean, I got taxed extra buying a pack of cigarettes because I didn't have that, you know. So, and there might be money laundering. There might be some other things in there, but I didn't have that number, so I paid more.
It's a pretty good way to put a lock and key on any type of crime. That's legit. That's legit.
Yeah. So let's see. I fly out of Rio, and I think it was a direct flight to Lima. Call it that. You know, nothing major happened there. So now I'm into a new country. I'm excited. I get, you know, my dad, my uncle, and my cousin are coming down. And so I get to the hotel. They're meeting me there like the next day or whatever. Or no, they were meeting me a couple days after that. And I'm walking around Miraflores, which is just the center of Lima, which is their capital.
Okay.
And in Peru, yeah.
Didn't catch on to that.
And I'm walking through the main square, and all of a sudden I hear, Wit! And I'm like looking around, and up walks this like British guy that I had met in Brazil. And like we drank or whatever and hung out, and we talked about that we're both going to be in Peru at the same time, but like, you know, we didn't make plans, didn't exchange information or whatever. And he just walks up and like was like, hey, like, and we just ran across each other.
That's cool.
And so, you know, we hung out for like that day, maybe the next day, went and saw some ruins and went to the mall, which Miraflores is cool. But there's a Wendy's and a Papa John's and a McDonald's and all that. So
I heard Panama City in Panama near the canal. It's like that. You can get anything that's American down there.
Yeah, I mean, I found American Spirit cigarettes.
Yeah.
I paid a lot for them.
They weren't Brazilian Spirit cigarettes.
No, they were imported. They were legit ones, man. I went back there a couple times. They were expensive for smokes down there, but I wanted my American Spirits because they also sold the tobacco. And at that point, I was rolling my own cigarettes. You know, yeah, it was cheaper. It's all about saving money, man.
Absolutely.
So hang out. Then my uncle and my cousin get there. Uncle Brian and Patrick. Then my dad shows up like the next day. And, you know, my dad had told me all of this stuff about what we were doing. I paid attention to none of it. I was like, you'll tell me when you get here. I don't care. I don't have to plan the next 2 weeks. I don't have to think about it. My dad's got it all worked out, or whatever, 2 or 3 weeks. Oh my God. I wish I had paid more attention. I think I had to get up at 3 or 4 a.m. every day.
Wow.
Like, So the first trip we have is to go see the Nazca lines. So it was a
That's legit.
6-hour bus ride there and
Whoa.
a 6-hour bus ride back in one day. 12 hours on a bus.
Why you got it?
So we get up, 3 o'clock in the morning, get on the bus, go down there. And for those who don't know what Nazca lines are, they are like figures that have been carved into the land that you really can't see standing on. So what did my dad set up? We get on a Cessna plane. So we get on this little small engine plane, 6-passenger, and we're flying off. And you're flying over it, and you can see these Nazca lines. And originally, what it's thought to be is that they were, giving these symbols or showing these symbols to the gods and things like that. And it took for years. They weren't discovered till like the 1900s.
Right.
Probably because you couldn't see them from the ground.
Right. We didn't have internet. Now we realize it's aliens.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So we did that, came back, and then I think the next day we did get to sleep in. I had to get up like 7 or something for a flight out to eastern Peru. And Peru, for those who don't know, is one of the most diverse terrain countries in the world. There's like 34 different types of terrain, from like desert, alpine, high alpine,
right,
high desert, all of this. They have like 27 types.
Right. The beach, the mountains, and everything in between.
And then on the east side of the mountains is Amazon.
Right.
Well, my dad's down there. He's never been to Peru and wants to go see that. I'm like, cool. So we fly out there, and somewhere near Dos Mil Rios. I don't even remember exactly where it was. I would have to look it up. But, we go out to some resort, in the middle of the Amazon, much nicer than the resort that I stayed at. Again, I'm on my dad's dime at this point. And my uncle, yeah, someone who's not like off work for 7 months and trying to travel, So we're out there, we're doing very similar tours, do the walk through the jungle here, and they're telling me all this stuff, and I go, I know what that tree is. He's gonna bang on that tree right now. Because when you bang on this specific tree in the Amazon, it's hollow in the center. It holds water for the dry season. So the way that they'll communicate is you can't really yell through the jungle. It's too dense. Right. But if you bang on this tree, it resonates up and goes out.
It's the wood.
And so you can communicate with that tree. And so we did a bunch of little stuff there. But one thing we got to do was we went to Monkey Island. And you go to this island, and there's hundreds of monkeys. And of course, the guides are smart. They bring bananas.
Right.
So they're like crawling over you. I have a picture of like my dad with just like a monkey walking down his arm. You're getting to feed them. They stole some girl's glasses, and we had to give him a banana to get the glasses back. And it's just like, but they're just everywhere.
They held the glasses for ransom, bro.
Yes, you're not dumb. And they could figure out, like, the guide went up and goes, oh, go up and do this, and like hold your hand really small. And the monkey came over and went to grab it and looked in there. There was nothing, and you like hissed at him and ran off. And so a really cool experience with my dad and Uncle Brian and stuff. So we were out there for a few days, flew back to Lima. I think we stayed in the same hotel for another night. And then, nice early, but no, we flew right into Cusco. That's what we did. So we flew into Cusco, and then we start going, okay, let's go find some tours, because you don't have to go.
Is it
kind of like Central Eastern? Yes.
Okay.
I'm looking it up.
You're good, man.
Right.
One of the things I have Woody on here is we're in the background just looking up and posting stuff for us. We're working on the production.
Yeah, I was right. Eastern, more southern. So Cusco is like what they call the gateway to Machu Picchu.
Okay.
So,
Heard it.
and we've already booked our trip to get to Machu Picchu, and that comes in a little bit. But so we're walking around and we're choosing tours. We're sitting in some tour shop. They're selling us on whatever, you know. And so we decided the next day to do the Mountain of Colors. And many people have seen that picture. You may not know if you've seen it, but you've seen it. And it tops out at like, I don't know, 16,500 feet, almost 17. And so again, guess what time we had to get up? 3 a.m. to get on a bus for like 3 or 4 hours to go down to this thing. And then you have to hike up it. And, you know, my dad comes from Nashville. Altitude was not kind to him.
Oh,
He got altitude.
Oh.
He got
The
altitude
last time I
sickness.
visited you, for me, probably.
Oh, it was worse. He was like throwing up and
Oh, no.
all this stuff. So he didn't make it to the top. I ended up getting a mule ride down for him.
Oh, that's cool.
And me and my uncle made it most of the way and took his pisco, which is the Peruvian liquor.
I
Pisco.
read it. We have that in my bar. The owner of my bar actually, there's a Pisco bar relatively close to here, and the owner of the bar love it, and they ordered some, and it's like, it's great. It's a talking piece. People see the bottle. It's just really cool. Like, they always ask about it, and I get to give the whole presentation and stuff. And, no, it does make a really good drink. Did you do Pisco Sour?
Oh yeah.
Okay. That's the classic one.
Oh yeah. With egg whites and everything in there.
Blend of, I don't know if you already described it, but I guess I can take a shot. It's a strong grape liquor that's kind of like brandy, but it's usually about 40% or more.
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Cheap pisco tastes like cheap tequila. The good stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
But that's the same with any liquor. You know, you get the cheap stuff. Yeah.
That's legit.
So we did Mountain of Color. My Uncle Brian pulls out this, goes, "Oh, we're going to take a shot because this is where I'm turning around." And
That's
I said,
cool.
"Okay." So me and his son hiked up there, got our pictures, you know, at 16,500 feet high. Hiked back down. My poor dad's just not doing well. And then it's a windy mountain road coming back down. And he's just throwing up into a trash bag in the bus. Like,
Oh, no.
got down to lower altitude. He, you know, was like, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Because the next day we did the Sacred Valley, which was a much lower altitude.
Yeah.
But Cusco.
So, go ahead with the Pisco thing.
No, what's your question?
I was going to say, like, for people that don't understand elevation, because, okay, so Tiff and I watched the movie Everest last night, and, you know, we went up to, what's Loving Pass is about 11,996, if I'm not wrong, that could be
11,990.
Okay, well, I was close.
Close. Just under 12.
A little bit. So we were just over 12, and that's whenever she first started having. And I'm not gonna lie, even me living in Florida this long, I started having a little bit of problems when we hiked up a little bit. And whenever I pulled up this diagram that showed just how much higher it is to go up Everest, and she's like, "Holy shit!" And I was like, "I know, it's insane. It's like you're literally on a time clock when you get up to a certain height." So
Once you get over 24,
right,
24 is the dead zone.
yeah, 24 is the dead zone. And what, base camp's 20-ish?
No, it's less than that.
Is it? Okay. Oh no, advanced base camp.
So base camp, and then you have camp 2, 3, 4, and stuff like that.
I did show that last night when we were watching it, and just describing to her and being like, "Look at how high these people go." Well, your dad at his age went up to 2,000 feet, probably higher than any mountain in Colorado.
The highest mountain in the continental United States is Mount Whitney, which comes in at 14,504 feet.
Right.
So literally 2,000 feet, which is about a half a mile.
That's insane. That's insane.
So if you think about that 16,500 feet, that is 3 miles high, right? That's
Yeah.
3 miles is above sea level, 3 miles above it.
We probably live at 500 at the most.
Something right around there.
You know what I mean? That's crazy.
So, and Cusco, I mean, he came back down and got to lower altitude, but Cusco's at like 11,000. So it's not like he's, it's in the mountains.
That's lovely.
So, the next day he was much better, had some trouble sleeping, but, got better, took some altitude medicine and whatnot. And then we did the Sacred Valley, which is a really interesting tour of like where they used to like grow crops, and they have the stairs, the really big stairs that look like stairs for giants, and then the spiral, the terraced agriculture, and they have that with a spiral. And what they had learned is that every level had a different temperature and a different humidity.
Oh, wow.
So they would grow different things on different levels because the water would run down, and like how smart.
Oh, that's ancient knowledge.
The Incas were. Like,
that's crazy.
Things that they just did, and the way that they built things and into the rock and up these like steep mountainous areas.
Whoa.
It's just an absolute gorgeous like thing to see. And of course, for luckily like it rained all day. All day. And so there was a lot of times where we'd get off and it'd be raining, and the tour guide would be like, back on the bus. And then he would just stand on the bus and point out the window.
Rain starting windows.
And I mean, I was standing there in my rain gear going, I'm ready to go hike the Andes here shortly. I got everything I need. I'm good. But it was a really cool thing going to all these temples. And then if you've ever seen like, they look like spheres on the side of a cliff that you can stay in hotels. That's where one of those spots is in the Sacred Valley, and it would be absolutely amazing to stay in.
That's cool.
So after that, it was time for us to start. We weren't just going to go to Machu Picchu. The Inca Trail was really expensive, so we did a different Inca Trail, because what people don't realize is everybody goes, oh, the Inca Trail, the Inca Trail. It's like, there's a lot of Inca Trails. The one year, they made a lot of them. So we did a different one called the Salcantay, and it goes up over Salcantay Pass. And we were supposed to leave one day, and we were just sitting there, and no one showed up. Guess what time we had to get up? 4 a.m.
You guys get up at 3. How's the day go?
No one shows up.
What?
So eventually we get a call. My dad calls like the tour guide, and they're like, there was some type of protest going on, and farmers were upset, and they took a bunch of boulders and rolled them across the main highway to make their statement. So we all went back to bed. I mean, and we lost the day. So like we were like, cool, this is a chill day now.
That does suck.
And so we kept kind of talking with them, and they're like, okay, yeah, so we're on for tomorrow. So instead of, which actually really worked out, because we were going to start at the bottom of the mountain and then hike to the spot. And they just drove us to that second day spot where we were supposed to camp, and stayed in, a little hostel thing before starting our next day trek, where it was the big climb. So that's also where kind of hurt a little bit. I was ready to go, because the next day we had to climb the Salcantay Pass with 15,000. And I mean, there's snow at the top. It snowed on us.
What?
At this point, we're June, July.
And still snow.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, that's winter, though. Gotcha.
Exactly.
Gotcha, I forgot.
And so we're up at the top of this 15,000 foot pass. My dad's got his oxygen, the boost oxygen things with him. Absolutely gorgeous. Like you're up at 15,000 feet, looking through the mountains. I did a side hike with them to go to this other lake and then come back. My dad didn't. And then the really cool thing about this hike is you get such a diverse terrain, kind of like I talked about before with Peru.
Mm-hmm.
So you're up in this mountainous region, and then you hike down to the jungle over the next couple days. So that was our climb. The rest of it, yeah, there's some uphill, there's some this, there's that, whatever, but most of it was kind of pretty much downhill. And you happen to go across some hot springs, which is like more or less like very public, big pool, hot spring, type thing.
Yeah.
And obviously we're at the same kind of group, and this place was this tour group was super great. Because every morning they would wake you up at like 5 a.m., but they would wake you up in your tent with cocoa tea.
Oh, nice.
Coca tea.
Correct.
So for those who don't know, cocaine. Yes. So you refine the leaves to make cocaine, but in the Peruvian culture, it's very common to chew on coca leaves, and you get not a similar buzz, much more like coffee.
It's
you
like
get kind of a caffeine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so every morning we'd get coca tea in the morning. So technically I've done cocaine with my dad. And they'll offer them to you when you're hiking, and you'll just chew on it, and it's kind of like dip, and whatnot. And, you're getting to know your hiking group and all this stuff. And we get to this like little town there. So we're not in a tent. We're actually in like a hostel or type thing. And there's this Irish guy. And me and him are drinking. And I learned that, I learned that night, don't ever play a drinking game with the Irish. Because it's getting late. Everybody's gone to bed. We have like a bottle of whiskey. He goes, do you want to play a drinking game? And I was like, what is it? He goes, I take a shot, then you take a shot. Then I take a shot. Then you take a shot until one of us quits. And he leans in and looks at me and goes, I've never lost this game. Bro, what was my saying in South America? Por qué no?
You're not man.
I think I got 5 shots in and said, I quit. I'm done.
What altitude was that, by the way? Let's reiterate that.
I was probably down to about 8 or 9.
So 5 shots were like 10 or 15.
And I had been drinking before it. It wasn't my first drink.
Right.
And yeah, so I gave up. I went to bed, and I dearly regretted my decisions at 5 a.m. the next day on my 4 or 5 hours of sleep. But the coca tea helped, breakfast, all that. And then we hike down, and the tour guide comes and goes, you can either take the train or you can hike the next section. My dad and my uncle had opted for the train.
Yeah. How long was it?
It would have been another 4 or 5 hours.
Bad.
And so I did the hike. They took the train. And at this point, you're getting down into the jungle, so it's getting hot and humid and stuff. And for those who don't know, this was the same hat I had on that hike. You can see it's got a couple holes. But I was washing it along the way in the creeks to cool myself off and stuff. Then we met up with my dad in Aguascalientes, which is really the real gateway of Machu Picchu. Is the launching point where you're actually close to it.
Right.
Base camp. I felt like I was in a ski resort.
Oh, yeah.
No, just that different of nice cobblestone, the very
that's cool.
ramped up like that beautiful town.
Yeah.
And that's where I got to try a Peruvian delicacy called koi,
Mhm.
which is guinea pig.
Ooh. I almost said something like guinea pigs earlier, dude. I knew they're from there, but
Guinea pig.
like big ones, huh?
Yeah. And my dad ordered it because he wanted to try it, and it took like 45 minutes for it to cook. And they don't like fillet it off for you. They cut it in half down the middle, like long ways, and give you half of it.
Just fillet up the spine.
Yep, right up the spine.
Wow. Beef firm?
Um, it was roasted,
So they
and yeah, and the best way I can describe it is comparable to duck with a crispier outside. Very, very good. But it's
Okay.
that like rich, fatty meat.
Yeah, they're chunky little monkeys.
Oh yeah. So, we had an early night that night because guess what time we had to get up the next day? 3 a.m. to go stand in line to get on a bus. So you can either hike to Machu Picchu, which is like a few thousand stairs up, or you can take the bus. And at this point, my dad and my uncle were all opting to take the bus.
Yeah.
And me being a good son at this point, wanted to spend time with my dad. And so I took the bus.
Yeah.
Because I did and you follow the road, so you're really just like inhaling bus exhaust the entire way. So that was also my excuse. So we got up at 3 a.m. to get in line by 3:30 for the buses to start loading at 5:30. We were already 7 buses back in line.
There's that many people doing it.
Yes, this was like my dad put all this together. You have to get like all of this stuff together. And
Incredible.
so we get in there and we get up there. The tour guide kind of gives this big spiel to all the hiking group and goes, "Okay, you're on your own. Go explore." Which was really great, because instead of trying to keep it together, you can kind of do all, whatever you want.
Right.
And so I have some great pictures I'll have to share with you, with me and my dad.
Yeah.
Because this was like on my dad's bucket list. Yeah. This was on my dad's bucket list to go to Machu Picchu. So this was his entire reason of coming to South America. Everything else was awesome.
Right.
So getting to show it, to see it with him, experience it with him. And it's a one-way track. You can't go back and all this stuff. And so you kind of weave through it. And for those of you who've seen a picture of Machu Picchu, or if we get one up, there is a little like mountain in the background, kind of like spiky, and it's called the Wana Picchu.
Okay.
And there's only 100 people a day allowed to climb this mountain.
Is it pretty intense?
Very.
Yeah.
It's very vertical, like chains in the wall and stuff.
Okay, it's climbing.
And it's not like climbing. It's just like, hold on, because be careful.
I like to think that like if you're hiking, you don't need ropes. But if all you have to use a carabiner and a rope, you're climbing. I don't care if it's like
no carabiners. You're not strapped in. So it is just very vertical, like close to like ladders almost. But my dad made a joke and took a picture of me.
Up a ladder though.
You are on your hands. You're kind of on your knees. It is sections like that. Okay. So you're climbing. And I remember my dad taking a picture of me. I'm like, "What are you taking a picture of? I'm just on these like stairs." He goes, "No, you don't understand. I never hold on to I don't ever see me like hold on to things, and you're holding on to the handrail." And that's my like telling him, like him taking that picture was to show everybody else that Wit never holds on to anything, and he's holding on here. That's how steep it is.
Right.
And
it's really disorienting to see pictures of steepness because you can easily just tilt the camera 10 degrees and change either way, make it steeper or lesser. It's really hard. So yeah, I like that. I can't wait to see that picture, and we will get that up on there.
And there's signs of be careful with selfies because people like take selfies and lean too far back and fall. So we got to climb this very limited, mountain to get a view looking back down at it.
Mhm.
And it was absolutely amazing. And we were lucky that we had gotten up so early because then as we look down, it's packed, like shoulder to shoulder. And we gotten up there pretty early. So we make our way back down and had a couple more days of just kind of hanging around Cusco, getting to eat llama and, all these different things before my dad's going to head out and my cousin, my Uncle Brian, and all of this. And at this point, I am fucking exhausted.
Bro.
I need a vacation for my vacation at this point. And I literally looked at my dad and go, this is a lot. So when you leave, I just want you to know I'm going to go find the cheapest hostel I can. And I'm going to sit there for a day. And I'm going to drink and I'm going to sleep. And that's it. And so they left like the next day or whatever. And I went to another hostel and did exactly that. I don't think I left the hostel. I went,
drank and slept.
yeah, and like just hung out. But that's where I met Alice and Ava.
Okay.
And they're from Scotland. So we're just kind of hanging out. And I'm like, no, like I'm kind of explaining it, So they come back the next day. We go out to the bars, hang out, and do all this. And we had figured out that we were both going to be in Arequipa. I was going to Lake Titicaca next. And so I took an overnight bus trying to like make more of my time, not have to pay for a hotel, sleep on the bus. So I get in at like 6 a.m. And Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable lake in the world. It's a massive lake where it like takes hours to boat across.
So
And
it's higher in elevation than Tahoe?
yes.
Wow. That water's cold.
Yeah, and so I get there at like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., somewhere in there. And start doing my tour, get my hotel, go all do that, drop my bags off, and get right onto a boat tour. And it's up at like 12:05 or so.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely taller than Tahoe. Holy shit.
Yeah. And, I went right onto a boat tour and ended up falling asleep on the boat. But they take you out to the floating islands, which is this old or historical tribe that I feel more like is kind of there for show now. But they have floating islands. And they make these islands out of reeds that they like weave together and band together. And it's the decomposition of these reeds that create nitrogen that makes them float. And they live on these islands.
Wow. And soil like water worlds.
Pretty much. And then every 10 years, 5 to 10 years, they have to make a new one.
That's crazy.
And that's right on the border of Bolivia. Near La Paz, I believe. And so I got to see Bolivia and made my way back to my hotel, went out to dinner with some people, whatnot, and then made my way to Arequipa, where I met up again with Ava and Alice. Arequipa is a gorgeous just town, the town square and all these things. And so we're kind of talking about what we want to do, and I got some ideas. Because, the deepest canyon in the world is right next to Arequipa, called Coca Canyon. So what do I want to do? Hike to the bottom of it, so I can hike back out of it. That was a horrible decision. I mean, it was great. So I convinced these two to come with me, and we all book a tour together, and somehow the tour group like splits us up. And I get into it with like the tour guide, and he's like, well, you might lose your hotel and all this stuff. And I was just like, some very choice words were dropped, and I was just like, yeah, fuck you. Like, do it. And like he started like looking at me like he was surprised. I was like, I ain't fucking doing this. I don't need you. I got everything I need in my bag. And he was just kind of like, well, I was like, I'm going to stay here with these friends that I decided to hike with. You can leave me if you want. I'll find another hotel. I'll sleep on the side of the road. I don't care. And he just kind of walked away. This other tour guide comes up and goes, you're in my tour group now. And I got transferred over because I was like, dude, like we booked together. Like just because you all put us in different groups, I don't care. I'm staying with my friends.
It's kind of like that non when you go to fly and you literally put two tickets together and then like you're sitting apart from each other. It's like, why is this happening right now?
Yeah. So that was interesting. And then next, it was just a 1 day down, camp at the bottom, or we were in a hostel, and then like a 4,000 or 5,000 vertical climbed out. Brutal, and we start again like 5 a.m. We're on trail. But the really cool thing was, as soon as you crested the top there, you could smell the coffee. And there's some Peruvian lady sitting there making coffee. And I just, oh my God, it was so fantastic. And it really was great up until the sun came up. And then you could see how much more you had to climb. But the coffee at the end made up for it.
Yeah.
So then we went back to Arequipa, a couple of long nights of partying. Got to try the Peruvian local and have some fun, stay up a little too late. And so then my friends move on. I can't remember where they went. They may have been going home. So I'm like figuring out what I'm going to do next. And I walked into my hostel and I saw this sign that says, hike a 20,000 foot mountain. So I walk over and I'm like, hey, well, what's this about? So they explain it to me. It was like $60, $70 for this tour. And they took you on a 4x4 road up a Jeep, a Jeep trail, up to about 17,000 feet. So we drove to 17,000 feet.
Right.
Then we had to load up all of our gear. And I backpacked for it was like 2 miles, 3 miles, maybe 4, nothing major, an hour or two, or whatever.
Cool.
So we went up and over, and then down into a bowl like this, and over to this spot.
Got you.
Where we would camp. And had this. This is the first time I think I had, and I had it on Copacabana Beach, but the first time I had it in Peru was bread. Have you ever heard of bread cheese? It's a very dense cheese that you just grill the cheese by itself, and it stays together and doesn't absolutely fantastic. Look at that.
Just now hearing about this.
Fantastic. So it's a really dense cheese. Had that, a really hearty meal, and I don't remember what time we went to bed, but the sun was still up. And I had met this girl at the hostel, and we ended up going on the same tour, just didn't even book it together, just happened to be on the same one. So we were sleeping in the same tent. She got altitude sickness, threw up in the middle of the night, went back to bed. There was another group that we woke up and we're like, where's the Swedes? They had altitude sickness so bad they had to get out that night.
Really?
In the middle of the night, they got them out.
How did that feeling?
I went to bed. They were there. I woke up. They were gone. So they got out. And we get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning again to start hiking because we've got about 3,000 or 4,000 vertical feet to climb. And so we start climbing, and this is the first time I really experienced altitude sickness. And I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this. I would lay down for a second on our brakes and kind of nod off a little bit. And then I would wake up gasping for air because my body's going you're not breathing.
It
Yeah.
feels like weight.
And I was talking to the guide, and he's like, well, you can go back down. It was just nonchalant about it. I don't care what you do. There's that way or there's this way. Whichever way you're going to go, just tell me what you're doing. He's like, but you can make it. And so I was like, all right. So I kind of hiked through it, and I don't know what changed, but I ended up feeling a lot better. So we're starting to summit out this mountain, and we get up to the top. And so, what do? I roll a cigarette. I couldn't get my Zippo to work. It wouldn't work. And I don't know if it just the light, whatever. It worked later that day, but I couldn't get it to the light. And I was like, you know what? I'm up this high. I don't need that. And then everybody's head turned towards me when I reach into my bag and I pull out a fifth of Jack Daniels. that I carried to the top, and they're all like, what the fuck? I'm like, hey man, there's no way. And I was like looking for a smaller bottle of like whiskey, but all they had was a fifth. So I carried a fifth.
What you saying? Grams make ounces, ounces make pounds, pounds make
Pounds
pounds.
make pain.
You're basically thinking in your head, looking over at them. Ounces make liters, and liters make.
And everybody was like in sheer shock, right? And then I took my shot and I started offering it to everybody else, and they were all kind of like, you know what? You got it here. Why not? And so like everybody kind of took a shot at the top, and about 20 miles north of us, there's a volcano, right? And all of a sudden, it starts smoking. And it had been going off and on a little bit, but it like plumes up. So we're like watching this volcano like spewing out ash, no fire, no lava, no danger.
A little sketchy.
Definitely a little sketchy. And then, so we're up there, we're all geared up. It's freezing cold. Now we got to make our way down. And we don't take the trail down. So if anybody's been to the Sierras or run down sand dunes or things like that, you can like sprint down sand. It just catches you. And if you fall, you tumble, like whatever. So we're just running down the side of this 20,000-foot mountain and just like in the sand. And I'm just like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. So much better than coming up. Oh, dude. So they call it like, there's like a type of skiing out in the Sierras where it's like you're skiing on scree. And that's kind of what it was. And so, yeah. So we got down, had to get back to camp, pack everything up, and we're this isn't like, this is a tour, but you're packing your tent, your sleeping bag, your everything out.
Right.
So after this day, we have to hike back out. And of course, the last little bit's a climb up and over. Still at like 17,000 feet. And that was a really like hard day for me. Like I was nauseous. I had a headache, all of this stuff. And I don't know what happened, whether it just was a mind switch or whatever, but I pushed through it and luckily it was okay. So make it down. Got to figure out where I'm going next. So I'm going to this place called Ica, which has got a little town next to it called Hasashina. And this is the most picturesque town you've ever seen. It is literally an oasis in the desert. Surrounded by walls of sand dunes. And there's just a lake and a town in the bottom of it.
Oh, nice.
And so I hung out there for like 3 days, hiked around the sand dunes. Didn't really get to do any tours. They had canceled the dune bugging due to some incidents before and whatnot. Didn't go sand dune skiing. I was like, you know what? I'm good. I ski at home.
It sucks the mouthful too. Like it wouldn't be like snow. Like you go face planting that, it's gonna be just like a mouthful.
So I opted to sit on the top of the sand dune and watch the paragliders and people falling skiing. And I packed up like 4 or 5 beers and just, hung out.
Get it.
Then I made my way north, back past Lima to a town called Juarez, which is the backpackers like town of Peru. If you're a backpacker and you want to go to Peru, look into Juarez. I went there to do the Cordillera Blanca and check into this hotel, and it was like the backpackers hostel, like very much about backpacking, climbing, mountain climbing, rock climbing, ice climbing, all of that.
Nice.
Getting my bearings, getting all my gear together, and I go talk to the owner of the hostel who's working the front desk. I was like, hey man, this is what I'm interested in. This is what I want to do. And I was kind of talking about some of my experience and what I've done, PCT and all this stuff. And he goes, you could do that, but that's not what you want to do. You want to do the Y wash. And for anybody who looks it up, it is not like it sounds. It is HUAY, and that spells Wywash.
Wywash.
The Wywash Cordelia.
Okay.
And the reason I want to like spell that out for people is I've done Everest Base Camp. I've hiked the Alps. I've hiked the Andes. I've hiked the Rockies. I've hiked the Sierras, the Appalachians. This is still one of the most beautiful hikes I have ever done in my entire life. And he goes, you want to do this hike? And I was like, okay, so tell me about it. So he pulls out this map right here, this physical map to me. He goes, okay, here's what you're going to do. Here's the trail, right? You're not going to follow that. You're going to do the high alpine route. And he goes, you're going to go with this. And he starts drawing with a pencil around and go do this and come this way and do that. I'm like, okay, all right. So I'm like talking to him, getting my gear together. I bought an extra blanket because I was worried about being cold. Making my calls to my parents and all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, I got to take a bus to a bus to a bus to get to the trailhead. And then you have to hike up. And there's a mine camp up there. So I end up getting dropped off. And I'm hitchhiking because I see a miner coming. I'm just like, hey, give me a ride. And he goes, where are you going? And I just kind of said it. He goes, yeah, hop in. So I just jumped in the back of this guy's truck. Gives me a ride, and he just stops in the middle of nowhere and goes, this is where you want. And hop out of the truck. And my first pass. So now understand, this was like, I want to say just over 100 miles or something. And I have 10 days worth of food that I'm carrying. So for those who, it was about 10 days. It took me 10 days.
Whoa.
And for those who don't understand, an average day of food is about 3 pounds, right? Roughly. Depending on what you're eating. Now I'm also prepared for snow, camping in the snow, all of this. My bag probably weighed about 60 pounds or so.
It
was a 55.
Pretty close,
There was food. No, that's what they consider an overnight bag.
That's crazy.
There was a grocery bag of food hanging off the back of my backpack because I couldn't fit it in there.
Yeah.
I had 3 jackets. I had an alpaca sweater. I had my puffy, and then my raincoat. I had thermals. I had pairs of socks. I had pants. I had my poncho and all this. So, all right, my first pass, 15,000 feet. And where I got dropped off, you just start climbing. This trail is really interesting because it only drops below 13,000 feet in one section for one day. That's it. Some of the passes come out to 17,000 feet. And so I hike up over this first pass, and I remember distinctly, like, the trail goes off this way, and there's this beautiful valley over here. And I'm looking at the map, and I'm going, all right, this is where I go. And I just walk off the trail this way and into the Andes. And I remember like being super nervous, like what's going to happen. I got my GPS transponder on me and stuff. So like, yeah, that story comes later.
When you die, spoiler alert, you're on this podcast.
I felt like it. So I come up and over this ridge, and there's this beautiful valley, and I start hiking down, and I find a very swampy area where I'm like, have to watch every step, or I'm stepping in puddles, and I'm like, fuck, this really sucks. The sun's starting to go down. I'm like, I gotta find somewhere to camp. So I find some rock to get out of the wind, set up my tent, make my dinner, and I'm like, man, this is really cool. Like, there's no one around me. All this stuff. Check in with my parents, because I could tell them I'm okay from my GPS transponder. And this valley goes all the way back into this beautiful waterfall. And I'm talking like 5 miles away type waterfall. I know it's there, can't see it. So the next day, when I somehow forgot that this guy said, don't go up the hill, go back this way into the top of the ridge. Well, I kind of got confused reading a paper map and knowing exactly where I was. And again, I'm doing this off of like a paper map and kind of like GPS on my phone on a pre-downloaded map that I'm trying to like correlate to his trail that he hand drew on here.
Right.
So I start going up this hill, and, it's a decently steep hill, nothing too crazy. And I'm up at the top, and then I notice that there's just a sheer 10-foot cliff. So I kind of hike down, I'm looking for a spot to climb, get up. And I'm like, man, like, it's getting worse. So I come back this way. I'm like, all right, this is my spot. I either have to go down and lose an entire day, or I have to climb up this 10-foot cliff. Now, mind you, my pack is probably 55 fucking pounds.
No. Do you have enough terrain? Is there a tree?
I didn't bring no trees. We're way above tree line. I'm
No.
still pushing probably 14, 15,000 feet. I didn't have any rope, didn't have any paracord. So like originally my thought was I'm going to climb up it with no backpack and I'm going to pull my backpack up. Didn't have any rope. No rope. And now if you look at my backpack.
One time, I tried hiking up the back of Buffalo Mountain by myself, and like it was all gravy. It was a nice day, midday or whatever. I probably started too late, but then like I get halfway up, I'm like calling my video chatting my son while eating my avocado and my oranges and stuff. I go up the backside of Buffalo, and I encountered something very similar where like I had worked so hard, and I knew the route down from the front if I got to the top, but the route that I took was like 3 times as long, and I ended up looking up at this tree that was about 15 foot up on a cliff, and I had no parent with me, no rope. Same situation. I was like, so I had, what do they call it, glycine?
Yep.
Yeah, I had the glycine halfway down the mountain because I was like, my feet are freezing, I'm out of food, I'm out of water, and the sun's going down. But yeah, so I feel your pain on that. So what did you end up doing? You climbed up, or no, you're screwed?
So the hill I was on was steep enough that if you started rolling, you weren't going to stop. It was probably like 35-degree angle. So I turned my GPS transponder on, and I thought to myself, at least if I slip, my parents will find the body.
Gotcha.
And then I climbed up.
Did you really?
Yeah. And I had no other choice. Like, I could have gone down and done all this, and I was just like, there's no water there, there's this, whatever.
Right.
And so it was such an adrenaline moment that I'm like climbing up, and I found every right spot, and I'm like struggling because, climbing by yourself is hard. Now when you have an extra 55, 60 pounds on your back, pulling you back, you were gripping even harder.
One wrong move, and you have twice as much momentum going back, or 50% more momentum or whatever, Like, that's crazy.
And I got to the top, and I remember, like, anybody's trying to climb over a ledge, it's not exactly easy, especially with weight on your back, and there just happened to be this one rock right in my left-hand grip, and I was able to grab, like, around it and cup it, and, like, grab another one up, get my leg up, and shift up, and I, like, stood up and just, like, screamed at the top of my lungs with like all this adrenaline of like, this was literally like life or death. Because if I had slipped, I would have fallen 10 feet and then just tumbled my way down. Probably wouldn't have died. Maybe. Don't know.
You could have been involved. You could have laid there in froze.
And, oh, dude, it was 100% worth every struggle.
Oh, yeah.
I then got to ridge walk. No trail. I'm not on the trail. I'm on the high alpine route. You're route finding in the Andes. And I'm just ridge walking. And there's just these 20, 25 foot thousand mountains next to me. And there's glaciers and there's rocks falling and landslides and avalanches. And I'm just walking, and you come out to this point. And I'll have to send you this picture that I have, but there's these 3 lakes that come down right next to these mountains, and then there's this massive lake that comes down this valley, and I knew I had to camp down here. Mm-hmm. And I just sat there and was just like, if I hadn't have done that, I would have been down in that valley down there and wouldn't have gotten this view. And then I had to get down the hill. And it was still like 35 degrees down. And it was just, I'm tired. My bag's too heavy. And I make my way down. I slip a couple times. It was just a knee buster for anybody who's a hiker. When you got those big steps down, you're just hurting your knees.
It's impact.
And
It'll tear you
it
apart.
was rough. So I come into the campsite. I pay my fee. I get in, start making dinner, talking to some other hikers. Guess who I run into? Some guy from Colorado who lives like down a divide, like 2 hours south of me. And then Ben, who lives up in Idaho, and Inga, who lives in Germany. And so I kind of meet them, just kind of hanging out. And so we all kind of get up the next day and start this beautiful hike around the lake and then back into those 3 lake valleys.
And so again, right?
It kind of did, yeah,
Yeah.
you know. And so we hike up, and this is like the picturesque spot of this hike where you're looking at these 3 lakes and there's these dramatic mountains there. So we're right at the bottom. We're about to climb another pass. I think this one's like 16.5, something like that. And I was stoked because there is what they claim is the world's highest bar up there. I don't think it's quite true, but some Peruvian lady every day would hike up to the top of this pass and sell beer.
Nice.
Unfortunately, as I started to climb, a blizzard rolled in. So I hunker down, find some rock overhang, eat lunch, and then take off. And I'm like, okay, let's head up. No beer to be found at the top. But it rolled into just another beautiful valley, nice easy slope down, and camped. And then the next day I had to decide, do I do the high alpine route again for another cutoff, or do I go to the hot springs that are on the trail?
Sounds a little more pleasant.
So I chose to go to the hot springs. There was a store. They sold cigarettes. They sold beer, ramen noodles. Correct decisions were made. So So we sat there and just hanging out in hot springs, all sore, beat up, and whatnot. And the next day was like the hard pass. It was like, I think 17. That was the big pass. And we hike up there.
Pretty damn tall.
And I'm hiking with my buddy from Colorado, and he's like, man, I could really use a drink right now. Well, I said, oh, really? Here's some whiskey. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I filled up a 20-ounce bottle of whiskey before I came because I always hike with whiskey. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah, here you go. And I got it out, and he's like, oh, dude, I'll just take a little sip. He's like, I just want to celebrate this moment. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I roll up a cigarette. He's like, you're rolling a cigarette at 17,000 feet? And I was like, yeah, and I'm going to drink whiskey.
That's how we roll.
And yeah, we just sat up there for a minute, just like enjoying the view. God, it was like and you're literally just hiking around this mountain range,
Right?
The Whitewash, mountain range, and it was very brutal hiking. Just for the altitude and weight. All of those guys I was hiking with were hiking with a tour group, so they took their bag every morning and put it on the mule. As I would hike past them with their day bags, with my 45, 55-pound bag going, I'll see y'all at camp.
Fuck your mule.
Yeah. But the great thing of meeting them is they had like one of the hot tents, and they had a big tent that like I would go hang out in their big tent with a table and stuff and cook dinner.
Oh,
and
nice.
So it really worked out. And so it was a couple more days. We went into a town where I resupplied a little bit, got a couple extra things to make sure I was good. And then there was another section for the high alpine route where you got up to the top of a pass, and the high alpine route went up higher, and I ended up taking this section. And I know I've showed you this picture of me like in my green jacket, like going like this with this beautiful lake and stuff in the background. And it was a pretty easy hike kind of getting over there. It was a little technical. And you're just looking down at this lake and this beautiful, like, other side of the Whitewash Cordelia. And that's one of my favorite pictures for those who may watch that know me from work. it's my Teams picture. It's literally my Microsoft Teams picture I use. And I love that picture because it was such a moment of like getting there. And I was like nervous about doing another high alpine route and all this stuff. But again, of course I had to come down that hill. There's no trail. And I took a tumble and like had to like flatten out and like stop myself from rolling and stuff. Got down there and met back up with them and just told them how amazing that beautiful, beautiful hike was. And I think that was our last day, or that was our last night, and we had to hike out. And it was like a 12-mile hike out, but it was all like nice and downhill. And I remember hiking, and one of the guides like caught me, and he looks at me and goes, "What are you doing up here?" And it's like, "I hike fast." And then like me and him kind of leapfrogged, and every time I leapfrogged with him, he kind of like looked at me and was like, "This gringo is hiking as fast as me." Because and I kind of explained to him I had done like thousands of miles and all this stuff. There's one crucial thing I kind of forgot to mention. My water filter broke in the middle of this hike.
No. Well,
And
if you're up high enough, if there's no wildlife, can't you just use the snow?
So, well, there was snow in certain areas, and I'm sitting there, I'm trying to filter this water, and this other guy comes up, he goes, "You don't have to filter that." I said, "Look around." I was like, "But there's cows around here." Like, I'm looking at cows. He goes, "It's fine. It's fine."
Nope.
I drank unfiltered water for 7 days.
Well,
Didn't get sick.
Guess he was right. It rolls downhill, and apparently if you're not uphill or downhill from it, then you're safe. But like, no, I don't. In Missouri one time, I went on this really long mountain bike ride, and I knew that the stream that was nearby was spring-fed, right? I had no tablets, I had nothing. And I was really thirsty, and I was like, fuck it. And I drank like a glass worth of water. I got so sick because it was down in a valley in Missouri, and everything around it was shitting and pissing in that valley. So, like, I got sick as fuck from that water. So, like, it's sketchy. It's really sketchy. It's a risk, but on an elevation, or on a slope, rather, I can see how it's a little safer.
So, looking back, it was very similar to that, where it's all glacier melt. I risked it for the biscuit, and I never got sick.
Right.
So that was an interesting like dynamic to it. So then I was leapfrogging with this guide. No, we had one more night after that, and we had to get there by a certain time to get the bus. So the next day I like hauled it out of there. My bag now is like, hey man, I'm down to like 20, 30 pounds.
Right?
I was just trucking. The guy from Colorado didn't do so well, ended up having to get on one of the mules and stuff and to keep up. Yeah. So got into town, had to take a couple, buses to get back. And then that hiking group and I were all exchanged numbers and whatnot. And we came out and went to get pizza and hung out. And me and the guy from Colorado went and found Cuban cigars. And
still good way to seal that deal.
Yeah, and so I got a great picture of him just sitting there because he'd never had a Cuban. And I was like, I don't really smoke cigars, but if they got a Cuban, okay, I'll smoke it. I've never smoked a Cuban. Now I can say I've smoked a Cuban.
The picture, we're going to put it in right here.
Yeah. So then, I had already kind of, planned some stuff after that. I stayed there for a couple of days in Juarez. He was flying back to the States, and I was going to Chile. So we got on a bus, and the buses in Peru, you have your Greyhound bus for $5 more. You get like a recliner and a hot meal and a TV or your Greyhound. And so I had learned this, and it was like Cruz del Sul. I'll give a shout out to that company. They were great. So we took a bus back to Lima, and I was like, I got to find a hotel and all this. He's like, hey man, I got a hotel right next to the airport. And so I just stayed like a Holiday Inn with him. and we ordered pizza for delivery. And we both got on planes the next day. He went north and I went south to Chile and flew into Santiago. And I was like pretty burned out at this time. Like, at this point, I'd spent 6 weeks in Peru, 2 months plus in Brazil. So I'm 3, 4 months, 5 months traveling, including the time in the US and whatnot. And fly down to Santiago, and I plan on like staying there for like 3 weeks, in there. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And for those who don't know Chile, it is very long and narrow. So you kind of have to decide, do you go north or do you go south? Well, as we mentioned earlier, it's winter down there still.
Time to rest.
So what did I do being in a ski resort? I went east to, Valley Nevado, and I went skiing in Chile. And I ended up meeting up with some British guy who's like, oh, that sounds fun. I'll go do that. And so he came up with me, and we stayed the night in some hostel and went skiing the next day. It was like 3 days before they closed. So we're like into their spring at this point.
You're on the slush.
Oh, it was slushy. I mean, I was supposed to stay another day. I was like, nah, dude, like I'm good. There's not a lot open, not good terrain. But God, it would have been amazing during the winter. So I did that, came back to Santiago. So at this point, I'm about a weekend. So then I go, okay, time to go north. So I went to the Atacama de Pedro de Atacama. And it's a desert in northern Chile, driest place in the world. Like you're talking way less than an inch of rain, like a tenth of an inch of rain a year, half inch of rain a year. And it's also like I didn't line it up very well because it's some of the best stargazing in the world.
During
I was there but I was there during a full moon.
Yeah.
But they have like, telescopes down there, like massive major electronic telescopes because there's so, little moisture in the air and whatnot. But I still went out and tried to look at the stars and went to the Valley of the Moon. In the Valley of the Moon, you can't see trees. You can't see anything green. It is rocks. It is desert. It is sand. It's hot. And so I just hung out in this little tiny town in the middle of a desert for a week or so and went up to some other spots. There was a spot. I was like, oh, they're going to take us into higher elevation, whatever. And then I got up there. I was like, it was cold. We went from like almost sea level to like 11,000, 12,000 feet. And again, hot springs.
Yes. Got to say this.
So it was really cool. Got to see geysers and all that stuff. But one of the coolest things out there that is like beyond all the nature and stuff, which is really awesome, was this Museum of the Meteors, I think it was called. And so you go into this little like dome things. It looks really kind of like shady, but you go in there and you pay, and they have a bunch of like meteorites.
Okay.
But you get to handle the meteorites. So you reach your hand in, and the meteorite's too big to pull back out of the hole. So I like am sitting there going, this came from outer space.
Right.
Like a couple of them. And so it was such a cool thing to like do that. And it was like one of those like, I'm bored. I'm going to go do this. And it was like something that really stuck out in my head. It's something like you would never get in the US. You would never like get that opportunity. So that was absolutely amazing. And then the next day, they have salt like lakes out there, and it's kind of like the Dead Sea where you can go float in it, and it's actually more like has a higher salt content than the Dead Sea.
Mm-hmm.
And so we take this trip out there, and you're floating in it and all this stuff, and just kind of hanging out, and it's really cool. And you don't realize how much salt there is in there, and then you get out of the water, and you're like, oh, there's showers there, right? And before you get to the showers, it's so hot and dry that everything's dried off and you just have white salt all over you, crystallizing on you. And I went and took a shower, and then they took us up to this other spot. And, you got this beautiful reflection of the Bolivian mountains because you're right on the border of Bolivia also. And I remember this is a weird kind of thing. Like, I never really liked olives. And I was on this tour, and they had olives. I'm like, man, I am starving. And I start eating these olives. I'm like, these are really good. And from then on, I love olives. But I like them.
We have blue cheese stuffed olives. If I'm hungry, I'm eating one of them dishes. They're so good.
So, yeah, I ate some olives, kind of finished up my tour there, made my way back to Santiago. So I'm hanging out, and I get up one day, and I walk out to go get breakfast, and there is a police out on the balcony, and there's a sniper. I'm like, I go over there, hey, what's going on? And they're like, oh, so the right next to the hostel I was in, it was like on the top floor of 10th floor or something, around a square, and there's this beautiful cathedral right there. And the president of Chile was coming there that day.
Oh, shit.
So they had, snipers out, same as, any president, they have their protection detail. But we were able to be out there, like, standing next to the snipers, like, watching the president pull up, get out of his limousine, wave to everybody, and go into church on Sunday.
That's cool.
So it was just one of those weird things of, like, you never know what's going to happen. I honestly just kind of, like, hung out in Santiago for a couple days. Went to this dance festival with some local, and they have something called an earthquake drink. I don't remember what was in it. But man, it made me speak really good Spanish.
No, you thought you were speaking really Spanish.
And I went out with some guy, dude, and like he got hammered. Like one of those, like, put your arm over my shoulder, buddy. We're gonna get you home. And I had to like get him back. And I ended up like meeting up with some locals after that, and I went to their house and all this, and like they invited me in, got hammered drunk, and went home. And then I had to start making my way back. I was out of money, Been about 4 months or so.
4 months, though. How much? Let's estimate how much you think you spent, and you were able to make it 4 months.
$8,000.
You can't live in America paying rent.
I didn't pay rent. I mean, you got to remember, hostels down there.
Well, no. What I'm saying is the employee. You were living in employee housing. You were living on employee housing at the time, correct?
Yes.
So let's think about that. Like, some people don't think that they can travel, but if they were to minimize their life, they could literally spend 4 months somewhere else. My bills are probably around $2,000 a month. You know what I mean? People can do this. People can do this.
So my biggest thing with people to learn how to travel for extended periods is understand two things. Getting there and getting home are generally the most expensive part.
Absolutely.
Second is that if you stay in a really nice hotel and you spend $100 a night,
you're fucked.
But if you stay in a hostel in a dorm room where you're spending $7, $11, that includes a cheap breakfast.
Yeah.
Like, there's one meal and a place to stay for $10, call it.
It's solid, dude. It's solid. And that's the way you travel.
And that's how you meet travelers.
Yes.
Because there's a common area. No, because there's a common area, and you're sitting there, you got I would always call it putting my flag up. And I would sit there with my travel book, and I would look for other travel books, and I would start a conversation with them.
That's what you
And then you go get a beer. You go on a tour together. Maybe you like them. Maybe you're going different ways. Maybe you hang out with them for one night. And I've had some amazing nights with people whose names I'll never remember. I might have a picture of my phone,
right?
But that's it.
I've got a couple of those for sure.
So I make my way back, fly through Fort Lauderdale. I had an 8-hour layover in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh.
And I landed like,
The beach is like,
oh, I did. So I did. And like, I got in like 4 a.m. and I said, fuck it. I'm going to go do this. I had to go check into another flight anyway. So I left, went to the beach, sat on the beach and like watched the sunrise.
Yeah.
Got breakfast on the beach and made the most of that 8 hours. Like a lot of people go, oh, I'm going to stay in the
Absolutely.
airport. Like, why?
Fuck
Go do
that.
something.
The airport's what? It was probably $10 or $15 Uber ride.
I Ubered there and walked back.
$2. Yeah. So like literally you could lay over and just go. So
It
like,
was like 3 miles or something, 4 miles, which again,
dude,
I'm coming off of this, like I'm carrying everything. I'm like, fuck it. Like I have to save money. And that's where you like Ubering is nice. Public
fuck
transportation,
Ubering.
it's cheaper.
Sorry, you fucked me. Still calling you customer service. Go on.
So understanding like what comforts are you willing to give up? Because staying in an
Yeah.
all-inclusive resort is really nice, but really expensive.
Absolutely. It's
But if you eat
pristine.
at street vendors, if you go out and explore the culture, one of the best meals, I didn't talk about this, that I still remember to this day was in Brazil. It was my like 4th day there.
Mhm.
There was some guy carrying a little grill with meat skewers. And
Oh,
still one of the
yes.
best meals.
Road
And
food
it was
or street
$1.
cart type food, you know? Like just the people who are making it like a real person would make it, but they just happen to be selling it in another country. Like that's where you're gonna get your best food. I had a couple food trucks in St. Thomas. I had some of the best food I've ever eaten. It was incredible, dude. Incredible. So anything else you want to add? At this point, you're back to Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale, made my way home, got back to my mountains, got back to work. You know, I will just add that traveling can be expensive, but it depends on what you want out of it.
Yeah.
And if you fly to Mexico, to South America, to Asia, and you stay somewhere, you could rent an apartment for a month for cheaper than staying in a hotel. There's a lot of ways to do it.
Absolutely. 100%.
So don't let the fear of not knowing the language. You'll pick it up. Learn a couple phrases, the
Right.
important one beer. Where's the bathroom? Thank you, no thank you, and por qué no. Like,
Right?
get you a long way.
It pays off, man. Well, it's been fun having you on again, man. This should be a fun episode after the other. There's gonna be lots of fun stuff installed. Cheers to you, brother.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody, for enjoying this episode. Wit's a legend. He'll be back. And we got fun.
It's been great. Until next time, and next time I'm on, it'll be Europe, and then I hiked part of the CDT and did a 500-mile walk home. So check in for that.
This man never stops with his adventures. So part 4 is coming. Let's go!